Hey everyone, Walter Crosby with Helix Sales Development and your host for Sales and Cigars. Have another fun episode today. I really enjoy doing this podcast because I get to meet these interesting people that I always find something in common with them. Besides being a business owner, usually or salesperson, Charles Reed is our guest from Get Payroll. He's a Marine, Vietnam vet. He's worked in the corporate world. He's worked with the IRS. He's a CPA, interesting guy, very worldly. Some great advice on what to do when dealing with the IRS. Some a 45S. If you don't know what that is, pay attention because he's got some a great idea there. But we talked a little bit about Michael Gerber and how that changed his business and how I looked at business. And we land on cigars. It was a fun episode from a guy that from the Midwest, grew up in Iowa and, lives in Texas. So go grab a cocktail, go grab a cigar, strap in for another fun episode of Sales and Cigars. Thanks. So Charles, thanks for taking some time to jump on the podcast today. I appreciate it.
Walter, it's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
I noticed in the profile that you were Vietnam vet. I want to say thank you for your service. It's really important to me that when I meet somebody who sacrificed for everyone else, so at least somebody gives them some appreciation for that. So thank you.
It's a lot better than when we came home the first time.
Yeah, I understand. So let's talk a little bit about, give us the 90-second version of who Charles is, what you do, and then we can dive into some of the questions I have around tax and IRS.
Sure. I'm a Midwestern boy. I grew up in Iowa. After high school, I joined the United States Marine Corps, spent 4 years, 2 years overseas, including a combat tour in Nam. Came back to Kansas City, married my wife. She had 5 kids when I married her. She was 10 years older than I was. I claim insanity, but we were married for 45 years before she passed. So it was a good marriage. Not perfect. Anybody who says he had a perfect marriage lies about other things. Realized that my military experience didn't get the appreciation in business that it should get. Didn't then, doesn't now. Went to school, got my BBA, MBA. Sat for and passed my CPA exam while I was still in graduate school. Went to the corporate world for 15 years. Realized I was never going to run a major corporation. I didn't have the political skills. I was unwilling to stab people in the back and toss them off the ladder. So just over 30 years ago, my wife and I started our own business.
Awesome. That's a great story. A Marine, that's to me, that's one more notch up there. My uncle was a Marine in Vietnam, and so I appreciate that. But 45 years, that's a nice long marriage, and not being able to survive in the corporate world. Not that you couldn't survive, but to flourish. I respect that because I've never worked in a big corporation for more than like 6 months. I'm not good with politics.
Exactly.
I'm really good at being honest. I'm really good at sharing feedback from a constructive point of view. But if somebody's a knucklehead, I'm gonna point it out. Behind closed doors, if they're my boss, but still gonna point it out.
Well, you just gave 3 examples of why you won't succeed in corporate life.
Well, I was at an EO event a couple of weeks ago, and this lady is very successful. She framed it up really well for people like her and us, in that she is unemployable at this point because she's not going to take any crap from anybody. She's not going to do something that she thinks is silly just because it's our policy. No, that's not a good reason. I mean, you could talk about it, but yeah. So being unemployable was something that I realized about 8, 9 years ago, and that's why I started my consultancy, because I realized I was going to have to go work for an asshole, and might as well be me if that's what's going to happen.
Yeah, I was pretty much in the same place some 30 years ago, and just said, if I'm going to run a business, it's going to have to be mine, and I'm not going to put up with these
You're
people.
here.
So, yeah.
So, you got a numbers background. Let's talk a little bit about IRS, our friends, for anybody of them that are listening. Um, yeah,
And
they
they are.
always are. Got one of those. My wife's got one of those Amazon Alexa things, so I'm sure there's more than IRS listening. Um, but if somebody gets that nasty letter, that notice from our friends at the Internal Revenue Service, after they panic and freak out for whatever 3 or 4 minutes, what should they do after that first flop sweat?
Well, obviously, the first thing to do is not to panic. It's a letter, it's not a bullet. Okay. The IRS makes millions of mistakes every year. It's 100,000 civil servants that don't, in many cases, understand what they're doing. They're not as well trained as they should be. They get moved around from department to department. I know a lot of them. I've worked with the IRS. I was on the IRS Advisory Council. So talk to your CPA. In all probability, it can be worked out. It's very possibly it's an IRS error. And remember, people don't realize this, but the IRS cannot penalize you for a simple mistake. That's not in the law. They're not allowed to. They can only penalize you for gross negligence
Or fraud?
Now, of course, well, yeah, that's criminal. That's a whole different ballgame. If you're doing criminal activity, that's a whole different ballgame. I don't even want to talk
absolutely.
to you. But if it's a problem that there's a mistake, either yours or the IRS's, that's what a CPA and a tax court practitioner can work with and solve for you. It's just paperwork. If there's more taxes due, yeah, you're going to have to pay those. But as you were saying beforehand, everybody should pay their fair share. We can argue about what's fair, of course, and so on. But the law is the law, and everybody should pay their fair share. So if you owe taxes, you pay it. If you don't, you don't. But the IRS puts very, very few people in jail, and mostly for fraud. They're not going to put you in jail because you made a mistake. They're not going to come and seize your house tomorrow. If you don't pay the taxes, yeah, they can in the end. But it's just a matter of finding out what the situation is, why they're claiming what they're claiming, and addressing it with competent professional help. Don't try and do it yourself. I tell my clients, don't ever talk to the IRS. Let me. I'm a professional. I know how to do this. I know the law. I know the IRS regulations, in many cases better than they do. And you will get emotionally involved. And this got brought home to me very, very well a couple of years ago, early in COVID. The IRS made a mistake on my employment taxes for my company. And I deal with those problems all the time. So I said, well, I'll call up the revenue officer and explain where they've made a mistake. Well, the revenue officer wasn't interested in talking to me. And he basically told me I didn't know what I was talking about and that he wasn't going to fix the problem. And as my voice starts to rise and I get louder on the phone, in the back of my mind, I'm going, Charles, don't do this, don't do this. And I find myself yelling at this Yahoo because he's an ignorant piece of whatever and won't do his job that he's required to do. And I know what he's required to do. And then he proceeded to get nastier about it and throw a levy on my company for no good reason. So it took me about 2 weeks to get a hold of his boss because nobody was at the office because of COVID. And I got a hold of his boss, and I'd calmed down by then and explained to him. He says, "No, Charles, that shouldn't have happened. We'll take care of it. It'll all go away." And it did. But that's why you don't talk to the IRS. You use a professional because you'll get emotionally upset with them real easy.
When it's personal. So I think that's really solid advice. And communication, to me, is important with them. You can't ignore things with the IRS.
Yeah, you cannot ignore them. You answer every letter. If you're doing it, answer every letter. Even if they send you the same one 2 weeks later, answer it again with a copy of what you answered the first one with. Answer everything, because there are certain things that if you don't answer, you then lose potential rights and appeals. So you always have to respond.
That's really why we need to hire, as a business owner or individual, to hire a professional to help solve those problems. It takes the emotion out of it. Takes the fact that we don't know what we're doing, right? When it comes to dotting the I's, crossing the T's, pushing the right forms. I was audited years ago, and I went to my CPA, gave him the letter, and he read it over, and he's like, "This is just a standard, like they're just coming to take a look. I'll handle it." And I, what does that mean? And he's like, "I'm going to handle it. So I'll arrange for the person. They're going to want to come to the office. They're going to want to walk around. They're going to ask questions. I'm going to answer the questions. We're going to go sit in your conference room, and I'll answer her questions. And you don't say anything unless I tell you to say something." Okay. So I got a no change order. I had to write a good sized check to him, but which I was happy to do, comparing to write a check to them. But I hadn't done anything wrong. He knew that. You know, he was on top of me about, his idea was pigs get fat, hogs get slaughtered, I think was his analogy. So
bulls make money, bears make money, and hogs or pigs get slaughtered.
Yeah, that's what it was. So, I mean, I don't want to do anything wrong, but I don't want to do anything, super right either. So, I mean, he knew that there wasn't any problem. So he just handled it. And, it was like a week out of my life that, I lost my conference room. But
we do that for our clients all the time, have for many, many years, mostly with great success. The first audit I prosecuted was for my father. I was a newly minted CPA, and he got a letter, and I looked at it. I said, "Okay, I'll do what your CPA did. I'll take care of it." So I called up the IRS, and we got together and met, and then I called my father afterwards, and I said, "You want the good news or the bad news?" He said, "Give me the bad news." I said, "It's because they'd wanted $2,000. And I told him it was $400. He said, "Well, if that's the bad news, what's the good news?" And I said, "It's a refund."
Nice.
He bought dinner.
Nice. Yeah, that's paying back to Dad for some headaches that you probably caused him as a teenager, but that's good.
Oh, that we won't even go there. I have 3 sons of my own and 2 daughters, so yeah.
You got it.
I got paid back.
So let me ask a question about another business IRS thing that I think most people, like, I didn't know what it was. So 45S. Can you kind of
45S? Yeah, it's a subsection of the IRS code. And what it does is, if you're a business and you give your people paid time off for what would otherwise be FMLA purposes, Family Medical Leave Act, taking care of kids, taking care of the spouse, being sick, adoption, several other things. If they take time off for that and you pay them, you can get a tax credit of up to 25% of what you pay them. It's
Tax
free money.
credit?
All you have to do, tax credit, not a reduction of income, an actual credit. And for an S corporation, that credit is a general business credit and flows through to your personal tax return and reduces your taxes dollar for dollar. So talk to your CPA. You have to do a couple of things. It has to be in your handbook and detail it out. And you have to be aggressive about how you design the program. And it doesn't handle the high paid people, but all of our clients take advantage of it, and we save them, oh, it's probably getting close to six figures a year now.
Wow.
For all across our clients of tax credits that they just put in their pocket.
So S corp, C corp, obviously LLCs. Is that if you have?
Oh, any business can take it, but if it's a pass through entity, it passes through to you personally as
So
well.
any qualifying time off that fits the Family Medical, whatever the rest of the acronym, Leave Act.
Leave Act.
So like there's a lot of
FMLA.
companies today giving paternity leave to dads. That would qualify. They get a couple of weeks off paid. That would qualify for that if it was documented properly.
Absolutely. If it's documented properly, if it's set up properly, sure. In fact, I tell my clients that mental health days, because if you're unable to work for whatever reason, then that's FMLA. So if you just say, hey, boss, I got to have a day off. I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. It's a mental health day. As far as I'm concerned, that qualifies for 45S.
And that's just documented through payroll or whatever.
Just documented through payroll. The Sally has to go home and take care of the kids for the day. The junior's sick, whatever. Joe has to go home and take care of Sally for a couple of days because she's sick. Got it from the kid. All that falls into it.
Right. And that can be depending upon the size of the organization, that could be a sizable amount of credit and credit.
Oh, we get ourselves. We have several $1,000s a year in credit.
How big's your organization?
Dozen people.
Nice. So then let's go there because one of the things I know I saw that you like to talk about that's kind of sales related is how you grew your business from basically something really small to taking care of your dad's audit, right, to 7-figure business. So, are there any big takeaways there? Like, is there a good story that we could share with professional service providers?
One of my biggest failures as a businessman is marketing. I thought I knew what I was doing, and we were growing gradually, but growing, and we got bigger and bigger and bigger and hired people and so on. And then we got big enough that I couldn't do the marketing anymore, so I hired a marketing professional. And it took less than 2 weeks for me to realize I did not know how to market my way out of a paper bag. And if I brought in marketing 20 years earlier, I'd be a very wealthy man today. So it taught me that, you need to know your strengths and weaknesses. And I thought I knew them, and I didn't. And one of my weaknesses was marketing. And my marketing professional staff now does things that I couldn't conceive of, that I would never have thought of. We have a full-time videographer that does all of our blogs and YouTube and Instagram and all these other things, all the video stuff, which is the thing these days, and turns out some beautiful stuff, which gets a lot of play. And we're getting a lot of play in the market that we otherwise never would have gotten. And it's all because I hired a professional that knew what they were doing when I thought I did, and I didn't.
Was that the first swing at a marketing professional? Was that the right person, or did it take more than one swing at the marketing professional?
They all did wonderful things. We're on our third. Uh, one lady left to move in with her whatever friend in the Northeast. The other one was younger, who had been her assistant. He decided to go to coding school, and then Anash, who's my current marketing manager, came in about 3 years ago. But all of them did wonderful things that I didn't conceive of, and helped shepherd us through a couple of books. And so, we've done wonderful things with them, and things that I would have
Hmm.
never thought of. So they all were good. I think Anash is the best of them, but my current one. But that's what I should think, right?
Yeah, you would hope so. So the message there is, stay in your lane. Figure out if you're a CPA, you're doing tax work, whatever that is. Um, Stay focused on that. Do that as best as possible. Get better at that. Sharpen your saw, and bring in marketing person just like you would bring in a lawyer or like we would bring in a CPA. Same kind of thinking.
Very much so. But more than that, it's work on your business, not in your
The old Michael
business.
Gerber line.
Okay. Gerber it's straight from Gerber. And I buy that book, The E Myth Revisited by the Dozen, give it out to clients, and it's required reading of every new employee. I believe in the concept and the execution of it, very much
Simple
so.
and to the point.
So, yeah,
It really helps people understand who they really are, why they started their business. Um,
it literally saved my business. Probably 20 some odd years ago, I was tearing my hair out with people and growth, and a friend of mine, because I was ready to fire everybody and move it back into the game room at the house and just be a sole proprietor. And a friend of mine gave me that book, and I read it, and it changed
wow.
my life and changed my business and my success curve and everything else you can think of. It is very dear to my heart. I reread it every few years just to keep it fresh.
It's one of those books that you can go back to, probably not every year, but every couple years. I have the original version that he signed for me. Um, I got
Oh,
to see him
wow.
speak, um, and then I bought the revisited, and there's some added value there. But I think it was really the first business book that I read, um, and I was engaged in it, and I could take the principles and apply them to actionable ideas to my business. And I think it stopped me from like the blowing up the company for similar reasons that that you shared, like
Yeah.
just employees. I mean, sometimes it's too
Ab-
much.
ab- no, absolutely. I'm a big Tom Peters fan and read all of his stuff. But Michael Gerber in the E Myth Revisited really brings it down to actionable things that a small business can really grasp and run with, and it's really the key to our success. So I'm
That's
a great
great.
believer in it.
It's great. It's fun to. It's why one of the reasons why I do this podcast is so I get to meet interesting people that I wouldn't normally meet, and then there's always something in common with that individual, right? Like there's always a thread there, right? And the E Myth, both been audited probably, so that's something else we have in common. But that book had a huge impact on me as well. So let me let me ask this question here, which I ask everybody. You know, does Charles have or have had a relationship with cigars in your
Absolutely. I smoked cigars for many, many years, starting when I was a teenager, and moved into more sophisticated cigars over the years. I remember Swisher Sweets when I was 18, and uh, other things. And I smoked cigars. I quit smoking cigarettes in '77. I probably smoked cigars for another 15 or 20 years after that. Not often, but I enjoyed them immensely. Um, my doctor convinced me to give them up here 20 years ago, but I remember them fondly, uh, and they were a nice part of my life. I really enjoyed my
Was
cigar
it something
smoking.
that you did individually, or was it a social thing for you?
Both. I remember we'd come back from the Culinary Olympics, and we were having a banquet. This was when smoking was still allowed. This was back in the '80s, and after a fabulous meal at one of the finest hotels put on by chefs that were part of the Culinary
Hmm.
Olympic group, wonderful, incredible food. I went down to get a cigar, and there were four of the men at the table. And Ruth said, "You don't come back." My wife said, "You don't come back without five of them." So I went down to the smoke shop and got five good cigars and brought them back up. And the five of us men, uh, the women weren't cigar smokers at that point, uh, though I know a number of them, including my right hand woman here is a cigar smoker, been with me for 25 years. But we had those five cigars at the
Wow.
table, uh, and that was a real bonding experience.
To me, I think they're very contemplative. They help me, think. If I want to work through a challenge or work through a creative thing, I'll grab one. I have my own cigar lounge, and it's usually where my office is. I'm sitting in my dining room today because my internet in my office is kaput. Um, but I will do that. But the part that I really enjoy is what you just described. Having, like, rarely can you sit around a table anymore and have a cigar with some folks. But I belong to some cigar clubs, and going and hanging out with a bunch of people, and you immediately have something in common with that individual.
Absolutely.
Um, it's a I mean, plus on a golf course, when I played golf, it was almost a mandatory thing, um, to have a couple of cigars on a golf course, along with some brown
Yeah,
libations. Um, so
absolutely.
um,
There's nothing in the world better than after a fine dinner, a fine cigar, and a fine cognac. I'm sorry. That's about as close to heaven as you can get.
I will swap out the cognac for a port, but I'm with you. I'm with you.
Uh, on occasion, a good port, I'll go with that too.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not refusing the cognac, but if somebody gives me the option, I'll go with the 30-year-old tawny. Thank you very much. Uh,
Oh yeah, well, okay.
um, yeah, there's those days of doing having that cigar out in a social situation, um, are gone. Um, Even on a
Yes.
golf course, I once had a lady. We're standing on the tee waiting for the fairway to clear, and this couple pulls up, you know, kind of where you would wait for the tee to clear, and they pull up, and she jumps out of the cart and marches over towards us. I'm not really paying attention, and she's like, "Sir, can you put that out?" And I'm like looking around, and I'm like, "You're talking to me?" She's like, "Yeah, your cigar's bothering me." And I'm like, "Oh, well, that seems fair." "Well, how's that fair?" I'm like, "Well, you're bothering me. Why don't you go back to your cart?" And by that time, her husband had come up to, like, collect her and say, "Why don't you leave the nice man alone and, come back to the cart." He backed it up. Um, but to me, it was like, holy crap, right? She must have been 30 yards away, and it was the sight of a cigar that caused her some heartache.
I know her name. It was Karen, right?
This was long before Karens were a thing, but she would be 100%, 100%. So, Charles, is there anything else that we should like? What is what's the best way to reach you? We're going to have your info in the show notes, but like your ideal client, like who would be like an ideal client to call you and say, "Hey, I got besides somebody with a an audit situation."
Basically, our business now is payroll and payroll related. So anybody that has payroll or a payroll problem or wants to look at changing how they do payroll or outsource it or change who they're outsourcing it to, getpayroll.com on the web. And my personal email is cjr@getpayroll.
Okay. And does it matter geographically? You can help anybody in the continental United States?
We're in 48 of the 50 states, and we've been in all of them at one point in time or another. I think we're missing Idaho and Maine at the moment, but other than that, we're in all the states, and we've done business in both of those. So yeah,
Is there a
it
number
doesn't
of
matter.
employees that you're is like 2 employees, 3 employees too small, or you look?
Oh, we do a lot of onesies. Just a doctor, a lawyer, a consultant that set up a corporation and has to be on payroll. We do a number of them. So one, somewhere around 300 to 500, they normally go in house, but we can handle
All
that.
right, sounds good. So everybody will have all that info in the show notes for somebody to track Charles down. Really appreciate you taking some time and sharing some insights. I think just the 45S is an interesting concept for us to take a look at. So thank you very much. Appreciate it.
My pleasure, Walter. My pleasure.